So, welcome back to another episode of Rugspirations, where we get to sort of chat and get to know other rug hookers from all over and different styles. And today, well, first, I should say my name's Robin Whitford, in case this is your first one you're watching. And I'm the owner of Hooking Outside the Lines. And today, my special guest is coming from Nova Scotia, Jen Peever. Welcome. It's so nice to have you today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to chatting.
So I think I first met you, Jen, in a class with your mom.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's neat. I love it when mother and daughters, or well, I'd love it if mothers and sons or fathers and daughters did it too. But when family members hook together, I think that is just so cool.
Yeah, it's a cool way to kind of connect. Connect over a hobby for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll get right into it then. What or who got you started into rug hooking?
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned it that it was my mom who got me into rug hooking, and it's kind of funny thinking back to it because I'm sure she like mentioned it to me several times before I actually kind of followed the suggestion, and I had no interest in it hearing about it from her, which is kind of bizarre. But then eventually she brought me like a rug hooking kit and just kind of put it in front of me, and as soon as I tried it, I was really like immediately captured by it. So it's kind of a funny reversal from thinking I didn't have any interest in it to like realizing it I have a lot of interest in it.
A lot of interest. And how long ago was that?
That was probably about just over a year ago now. So I'm a pandemic hooker. I'm a new hooker.
A new hooker. Wow. And you've been quite productive then, because I love seeing your stuff on Instagram as well. That always.
Yeah, I'm approaching the 100th project mark pretty soon.
Oh my
Yeah, I'm
goodness.
getting pretty close. So yeah, I always have a project going, and yeah, kind of
And
cycle through them.
did you grow up with your mother hooking, or is she a relatively new hooker as well?
She's a new hooker as well. She was a knitter growing up, and I knit as well. So we definitely had like the fiber kind of background, and that was something that I was familiar and around, but not hooking.
No.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think a lot of people started during the pandemic. We have a lot of new hookers, which is great. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Um, do you have a favorite part of the process, like planning the rug, work, like doing the actual pulling the loops or finishing it, sitting back admiring it, or like many of us, the shopping and gathering supplies? Is there one that you can pick out as a favorite?
I think there's kind of two that stick out to me as my favorite. I love planning projects, and I love the process of like gathering inspiration photos and kind of color palettes and and then drawing patterns as well. I love sitting and drawing patterns. So that's one part that I really enjoy. But the other thing that I really like doing is shopping my own stash for afterwards. So I love sitting in my craft room and sitting on the floor and just going through fiber and picking out like the palette for my project. And I love how it looks when you just have kind of the mix of the colors that you're going to use laid out. So that's definitely a favorite part as well.
Yes, yes. I like doing that too. I always have a pile, sort of like pull out all the possibilities and then weed them out as I go along.
Yeah. I just
Uh,
love the look of the pile too. Like it's
yeah.
such an interesting way to kind of develop your palette for a piece.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned designing your own patterns, because I know a lot of hookers are intimidated by that process or just don't feel it's part of the process for them. So I'm curious, did you start designing immediately when you started hooking, or was it like you mentioned a kit? Did you feel like, oh, I like the kit, but I want my own ideas or my own design?
Yeah, so I after I did the first kit, I went immediately into designing my own pattern. And I think that was what I was really excited about. It was like all of a sudden like a ton of options that opened up for me after endless options in terms of the fiber, in terms of what subjects I could use. So my first rug after the kit was a larger one, and it was kind of a study on different types of plant leaves of a different species, and so it was like all the different variegation patterns and things like that. So yeah, I love, and I still love patterns, but I also love designing my own as well. So it's kind of a mix of both.
And just out of curiosity, I'm so fascinated by people that love to design their own, because I do too. But did you feel like an artist before? Like, did you feel like, oh, I can draw, I can?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I felt like an artist before. I was definitely what I would say I was a crafter. I've always been interested in, like I said, knitting, and I was interested in paper craft. I've kind of dabbled in some painting. And so I felt like rug hooking kind of took all those skills and put them together in a way that was ideal for me, which was really interesting. It took kind of like the doodling from my paper craft, where I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily a drawer, but I like, kind of rough sketching is up my alley. And then, as I said, the choosing of the fiber, it kind of brought all those pieces together where I kind of more feel like an artist now afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, this question might seem a little bit weird, but in your time as a rug hooker, is there something you wish you'd learned sooner? Like, is there something that you've learned that you're like, oh, I wish I'm going to tell every new hooker I meet about this so that they don't stress or don't worry about something?
Well, for me personally, I think in general, I wish I'd come to rug hooking sooner. And so I wish I would have been kind of more open to that possibility. But beyond that, I think one of the things that I kind of feel like I realized after kind of going through it a bit is that even though it's like a traditionally based craft, doesn't mean it has to kind of stay in tradition. And so, there aren't necessarily fixed rules as much as I think there is an impression of that there might be. You can really kind of experiment, and it's really just a matter of what you can make work. So not so much the rules part of it, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that is
So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Well, and that's awesome that you feel that way from the get-go. Like, I'm really happy to hear that that was your experience too, that you just could play and experiment and explore.
Yeah, I think it can be really confining otherwise. And so I think when you have that openness, that it can be whatever you want it to be, it really kind of opens a lot of doors.
And also, when you mentioned you wish you'd come to it sooner, is there something? Because my kids are not interested at all, which is fine, and they may never be. But I'm thinking there are other people who I could see it in them, but I don't know how to approach them or how to say the right things to make them want to try it. So is there something that you feel like either your mom or the rug hooking community could have presented things differently to make it sort of, click earlier for you?
I think probably if I had done like a beginner class at some point in time, then it would have clicked, because really it was just a matter of like having it in my hands and feeling it. That was kind of when it really clicked. So I think, the classes that are beginner courses where you're doing like an initial pattern are awesome. And I would just say to people, like, you never know what hobby you might enjoy until you really try it. And that was kind of the moral of this story, is that I didn't realize that it was really going to be something that spoke to me until I tried it and it really clicked.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point. And I think you're right. I think just having it in your hand too, it's either something that feels like interesting and you want to learn more, or maybe not. But yeah, you don't know until you tried pulling loops. And
Yeah, I think the other thing too that is kind of a good kind of segue into rug hooking, or introduction to rug hooking now, I would say, is more to like the fact that tufting and TikToks about tufting videos have become more of a focus.
Yep.
Like showing people that is kind of rooted in rug hooking and more traditional crafts. I think that is another link that's important, and can be made as well.
Yeah, that is true. I love seeing the tufting videos and like the TikToks that you mentioned. I'm relatively new on TikTok, but I absolutely love them. And yeah, I try and tell people, like even my kids' friends who are teenagers, they come and they're like, oh, some of them have seen those videos. And I'm like, that's exactly what I do, except without the machine. Like I do it one loop at a time. So yeah, it's the same. It's just slower without the gun or the tufting gun. But yeah, maybe we need to make more TikToks to make the rug hooking as exciting.
Because I definitely think it has the potential to be, right. It just kind of, the exposure, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a favorite like material or tool or yarn or something that you're like, oh, rug hooking would not be the same if I didn't have this?
Do you know what? This is a silly little one, but I have like a little scrap bag with a magnet for my scissors. And I was just constantly like, I'd be hooking and then I'd be constantly like doing the pad around from where my scissors were. So as much as that's a silly little thing, it has definitely made like the hooking process a lot smoother for me, where I can actually find my scissors. So that one's a nice one for sure.
That is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also,
I was gonna say, what else do you use to hook with?
Oh, so in terms of like backing, when I started, I was like, what's the issue with burlap? This is great. I'll keep using burlap forever. And then I tried linen and it spoiled me a bit. So now I'm kind of stuck on the linen, I think, and it works really well.
Yeah. Yeah. I was the same too. I did use burlap at the beginning, and I got some nice Scottish burlap that I thought was like the fancy burlap. And then still, once you try linen and rug warp, I still love rug warp, but I know that's
I
not it.
definitely have to try that as well.
Oh yeah. If you've never tried it and you like linen,
Mm.
I really like rug warp because it's really quite soft. I mean, linen is soft too, but yeah, there's something about rug warp that I'm a cotton kind of person, so I love it. Um, yeah. Is there a way that you can describe what rug hooking does for you? Like, why do you keep doing it? What is sort of
It's interesting because I was thinking about this question earlier. I think this is the one I thought about the most. Um, and it's kind of like a lot of different things wrapped up into one. Like I think I have a day job that's very like analytical and not necessarily creative. And so I almost feel like when I rug hook after my job, it's like switching off to the other part of my brain where I
Mhm.
can like turn off the side that's kind of worked all day and I, kind of feel rejuvenated and I get to experience the creativity from it. But it's also because I came to rug cooking during the pandemic, I think that kind of played a lot into the purpose that it plays for me. And so, um, during the pandemic, we weren't seeing a lot of people really, and we weren't going a lot of places. And so now I can't really imagine having gone through those couple of years without rug cooking because I've spent so much time doing it in the last few years, and it's really kind of taken up an important place in my life. And then the last thing too is just, as I said, like a connection with my mom and my sister now because she's rug cooking as well. So we have like a little Facebook chat group where we send each other pictures of our projects that we have going on, and we talk about what we're working on and stuff. So it's been a neat way to connect with them by distance as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Because your mom doesn't like, she lives near me. So um,
Yeah.
that is fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about or how the project started? Where you and maybe your sister too, but I did notice you and your mom were doing the same pattern, but without showing each other. Because I bet other people would love to do this. And I just think it's such a fun idea.
Yeah, it was really fun to do. So um, sometimes it just happens that I'll be drawing a pattern and my mom likes it as well. So we'll both decide to do it or and sometimes it happens just kind of organically. So then we'll do up the pattern and we pick kind of a size to do it. But as I said, we don't show each other through the process. And it's tough to kind of not do that because you want to know what the other person's getting up to. But it's so interesting at the end to see how two different people can interpret one subject. And now we've done it a couple of times and we always find it just as interesting. And they're always really different. And it's really interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun to see when you shared it on Instagram too. And we'll share your Instagram on the bottom of the YouTube video so people can go and check out some of your work because I think it's just fascinating. And you said you are up to close to 100 pieces. So are you keeping track? Are you journaling this process so far or?
Yeah, so I keep track just because some of the rugs I end up giving away. And
Mhm.
so it's more like I more keep track of it in terms of the photos. Like I keep kind of a photo of everything I've completed so I can go and look back. But in that process, I've also kind of numbered them just for to identify them to myself. And I just kind of like to look back, as I said, on what I've done in the past and kind of the evolution. And it gives me ideas for things that I want to do in the future or things. Sometimes I think that I want to redo a project now that I've kind of hooked more because I feel like it would turn out completely differently.
Yeah. And I'm sure it would. Like, I think that's one of the beautiful things too about any art, but particularly rug cooking is it can be so inspiring. One pattern could be done endless ways. And yeah, as we learn more, experiment more, it's sort of like, oh, now I want to try that again with different material or different colors or um, yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting. And so that's so good to hear that you are keeping track because that's one of the big things I talk about with people lately because I am not good at this myself. And this year I've committed to doing better in terms of tracking my work and labeling my work. And so hearing that a new rug hooker is doing that is just makes me happy.
Oh, I'm glad.
That is awesome. So I have a picture that you shared with me that is just so beautiful. I will share it on the screen here. There we go. Can you see it?
Just loading for me, but
Oh, okay. Well, wait a second then.
there we go.
There, perfect. So what can you tell us about this? Whose house
Yeah,
is
so
this? I want
so this is actually it's my in-laws house on Prince Edward Island. And my father-in-law does the gardening at their house. And when we pulled up to their house on this particular day that I took the photos, I just remember like looking at his flowers and the way they were arranged and thinking that it was so stunning the way he had like placed all the colors and the different textures. And it really just spoke to me that day. So I went out in the garden, took a picture, and I immediately knew I was going to hook that particular picture. And usually when I hook projects, I really shop my stash and I don't make an effort to go out and buy stuff specifically for a project. Like I really try and make use of what I have. But for this one in particular, I really wanted it, like, for example, the siding is a particular color. It's like a bluish gray. And I really wanted to get that color right to represent the house. And so I actually went like shopping for this project. So that was a different experience. And it's the only project that I've done this for. And when I went shopping, the other thing that I did is I brought along a photo, and I wanted the flower bed to really capture kind of the textures and the colors that I had seen. And so for each of the plants in the garden, I wanted to have a very different like texture or fiber so that it was really contrasting, so that you could really tell like the kind of bunches of plants. And so for a lot of the flowers, I picked like little bits of different things so that I could really create that contrast in the species.
Yeah, that is great.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned your stash. As a knitter, I can imagine, because I have always had a stash, but did you start using only yarns, or did you start with wool strips as well? Like, was that a later addition?
No, that was a pretty from the get-go addition, just because I had used the kit, like a kit to start, and the kit had a mix of both. I'm very lucky that my mom shares fiber with me. So I did have yarn from knitting, and that was great. But she's also kind of shared some of her fiber stash with me. And so I've been able to incorporate wool as well. And I also really like t-shirts. So I have like boxes of all our clothes that are kind of on the way out that I cut up for rug cooking. And my new favorite is stretch velvet. I love stretch velvet.
Me too. Me too. Ugh, it is beautiful. And yeah, I totally see what you mean about the flowers, because like in the grasses, which is beautiful, it just looks like a beautiful lawn with the different variations in the greens. But in the flowers, it really looks like different plants. Like if I knew plants, I could probably identify them, but I don't know plants. So it is really beautiful. Now, how challenging was to do like the things like the railing? Because all that detail is so beautifully done.
So when I am hooking something that needs those like really straight lines like that, I try and pick materials that just have a bit more structure to them. So things like the t-shirt, I find you can get kind of more of a bulky line to them. And then I also used wool strips as well for some of the railings. So then you get like the really kind of precise lines. So that's kind of part of the decision-making process when I'm picking out fibers as well, is where they're going to be within a piece. Like, you know, obviously within like the trees in the back, I don't want necessarily that same structure. And so I use kind of more sturdy materials in the house, and then kind of more flowy materials in the background.
Yeah. Oh, well, it is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And how big is
Thank
it?
you.
It's so hard to tell, online on a picture.
It's about 16 by 20 inches, I would say. Yeah.
So
So
a
it's
lot of detail
large. And yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I really want to make sure that you could get that detail, especially as I said in the flowers, because I wanted that to kind of stand out.
Yeah. Oh, it is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And does it have a
Thank
name?
you.
Did you title it?
No, it doesn't have a name necessarily. Yeah.
I was just curious, but I don't usually name all of mine either, but awesome. Thank you so much. I do have one more question that I was just thinking too. People in your world, like in your friend group, like, are they interested now in what you're doing because they see you so prolific at it, or are you
Yeah,
converting other hookers?
it's been really nice to like have interest from my friends. It's funny because we have like a group of neighbors who live side by side, and they've all asked me for rugs, so that's been awesome to make rugs for them. Made pet portraits for them, and kind of some silly rugs for their home offices and stuff, so that's been nice. And also to connect with people that I didn't realize were rug hookers that I already knew, so that's been interesting as well.
That is interesting. Yeah, I do find wherever I go, I meet somebody that knows about rug cooking. I just found out on my little street that I moved last summer, and there's like 12 houses on my dirt road. And the lady at the end of it, like the very last house, she's a rug hooker and punch needle artist, and was like, who knew, in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a cool way to make connections with
So,
people. It really is.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your sort of thoughts and your experience as a new rug hooker, and obviously a very talented one. I look forward to seeing more of your work. And yeah, and talking again. Take care.
Thank you so much.